Joining me now from the great state of Delaware, by way of Washington, D.C., United States Senator Chris Coons. Senator, did you watch football this weekend? I hope so.
I watched a little bit, but frankly, I was also on my way down to D.C. for a dinner last night. So I was checking the scores and the updates sort of under the table surreptitiously while I was at a big dinner here last night.
The last two weekends in the NFL have been the best two of my life. I mean, I can't remember any time that I've paid close attention where we've had outcomes as exciting as these have been. And I asked you the football question at the outset because I once had the pleasure of sitting with you at an Eagles game, so I know that when work doesn't call, Chris Coons is paying attention.
Absolutely. Last weekend's games, which I got to watch closely, were incredible. I mean, I've never seen that many playoff games in one weekend come down to literally not the last 5 minutes, not the last 2 minutes, but literally the last play. Some of the greatest football I've ever seen.
You're looking very regal today. For those who will watch us on YouTube, where exactly are you? Are you in the White House as you're speaking to me?
No, Michael, I'm in the Russell Senate office building. This is the first building that was built for senators. There's 3 Senate buildings. And one of the things I like about it is we've got fireplaces in our offices. So that's the thing that's behind me. It doesn't work. It's much like the Senate. It's purely here for show. But it's a beautiful office. I've got a great view of the Capitol. And I've got what was President Biden's desk for 36 years while he was a senator. He actually also took it over to the White House with him for 8 years as vice president. But it is property of the Russell Senate office building. So when he left his service as vice president, he was kind enough to get it returned to me. And I'm in the offices formerly occupied by Senator John McCain, a dear friend. So I'm reminded every morning I come in here of the legacy of service of 2 great senators who were actually personal friends over the decades of their time here in the Senate together, Senator McCain and President Biden.
Is there tradition that one signs their name in that desk?
Yes, and that's a different desk. That's the desk on the floor of the Senate. And I also have what was President Biden's desk on the floor of the Senate. It was also the desk of Senator Ed Muskie and of President Jack Kennedy.
Wow, that's some real heritage. That the provenance and
you should come see it sometime, Michael. It's kind of fun.
And someday they'll say Chris Coons had this desk. That's awesome. Hey, on unfortunately far more serious matters, the former president had a rally this weekend, and I wouldn't bring it up except that he said something pretty alarming in that rally. I thought so, and I know you will too. He spoke of perhaps providing pardons to those who are currently being prosecuted with regard to January 6th. Your reaction to that is what?
I can't believe that former President Trump is still capable of saying anything that surprises me. But I was genuinely surprised that he would think this would appeal to millions of Americans, that it would seemingly appeal to millions of Americans to not just insist over and over and over again for an entire year that the election was stolen without any foundation, but that today, after we just marked the 1-year anniversary of the January 6th riot and assault on our Capitol, that he would suggest that those folks who smashed into the Capitol, who assaulted 140 police officers, and who threatened to hang his vice president, that those folks should be pardoned, is as clear a demonstration as we can have of where former President Trump would take our country if we made the spectacular mistake of electing him president again.
I wondered, I thought many of those same thoughts, but I also wondered something else, Senator. I wondered if it would have an impact on potential plea agreements. If I'm someone being prosecuted, not for a misdemeanor, but for one of the more serious charges in connection with January 6th, and I were going to go along and plead guilty, maybe now I say, I'm going to hold out because Donald Trump may pardon me.
Well, we're a long way from the next presidential election, and you're right. Part of what President Trump did while he was president was publicly signaling to folks who were under investigation, under indictment, in some cases under prosecution in connection with the Mueller probe. So this is ground that he has tread before. But we are a long way from the next presidential election, and those cases are moving forward swiftly. The other thing that gravely concerned me, Michael, about that rally was a clip I saw where he was also saying that if these prosecutors get out of hand, we should have mass protest rallies, actions against them. He continues to do things to destabilize our democracy, the rule of law, and the way that we conduct ourselves here in the United States. He is the only president in modern history, certainly in my lifetime, to refuse to go to the inauguration of his successor, to refuse to accept the results of 60 different court actions that he lost, where he challenged the outcome of the election, and to frankly refuse to move forward, even when many of the leaders of his own party are asking him to focus on future elections rather than relitigating the election he lost to President Joe Biden.
So do the comments that he made this weekend embolden the case for reforming the Electoral College Act of 1887? Is that something the Senate can get done?
Yes, I'm optimistic about that. We had a Zoom call, a conference call with more than a dozen senators this past week, Republicans and Democrats, talking through different provisions of the ECA. Now, this is not the broader voting rights reform effort that I supported, that all 50 Democrats supported 2 weeks ago, but it would take some specific provisions of this poorly crafted law that goes back to the 1880s and clarify a few areas where there's still some little wiggle room for argument. I don't think there is any credible room for argument that the Vice President of the United States has the power to overturn the results of the election during the counting of the electors' ballots. But clearly one of Trump's legal supporters and advocates did believe that. And there is a significant group of senators of both parties who think we should make it perfectly clear and revise the ECA to that effect. I also hope that we will take up and pass bipartisan legislation that will provide greater protection to elections officials, provide greater predictability and support around efforts that are being made in a number of states across the country to replace nonpartisan election officials with determinations by elected officials, by state general assemblies, for example.
You know, when the voting rights subject comes up, oftentimes the response is to say, well, look at the president's home state. Your home state of Delaware. In fact, Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia, was a guest of mine here recently, and he made the observation that it's actually, I'm paraphrasing, but that it's actually easier to vote in Georgia than it is in Delaware. And you know, there have been a number of analyses of this issue. The Center for Election Innovation and Research points out that Delaware, Connecticut, New York rank in the bottom third of states in their access to early and mail-in balloting. What do you say to that? Because I know you've heard that criticism.
I say they've got a point, that over the arc of the decades of my service as an elected official, over 20 years, we have gradually made changes to Delaware's election laws to make it easier to vote. For example, 5 years ago, Governor Carney, with a bipartisan group of legislators, did away with the requirement that an absentee ballot be notarized, which was a significant barrier to getting an absentee ballot. We are currently in the second stage of a 2-session effort to amend our state constitution to allow mail-in balloting or no-fault absentee balloting. But look at this point, which I think is an important one. We are gradually making changes to our election laws in Delaware to make it easier to vote. There's a dozen or more states that have already passed laws that make it harder to vote. Many of the things they are rolling back are changes that occurred in this pandemic. For example, allowing drop boxes or 24-hour voting or expanding early voting. Given that the pandemic is far from over, given that it is exactly people who are medically vulnerable, who are senior citizens, or who are essential workers and have to work, why would we be rolling back protections that made it easier to vote during a pandemic? In 2020, we achieved record turnout and virtually no cases of election fraud. So my question to my Republican colleagues, my response to your question, Michael, would be first, yes, you're right. Delaware, over a long period of time, has needed to make reforms to make early voting, mail-in voting, easier registration possible. we are moving in that direction. And our legislature and our governor are making changes to retain changes that we made because of the pandemic. Why then would other states, 24 states, be taking up and considering laws, and in a dozen states enacting them, that make it harder to vote? The motivations seem to centrally be around the big lie. They are citing over and over in debates in these state legislatures as they pass party line vote changes to their voting laws. They cite the fact that President Trump, in their view, was unjustly denied the electoral votes of those particular states. That's deeply concerning because in more than 60 court actions, no federal court found that President Trump actually won a state that he claimed he had won. And there's been no concrete evidence of widespread fraud as claimed by the former president. So I'll say, Michael, you're right. Delaware needs to keep making progress, and so do many other states. But my question is about our trajectory going forward.
And finally, Senator Coons, because I have to be mindful of your schedule, and I appreciate that, we marked within the last week to 10 days, actually, I guess 11 days, the one-year anniversary of the inauguration of your close friend, your predecessor, as you hold that seat. You tweeted at the time, in 1 year, at POTUS has gotten shots in arms, secured generational investment in our roads and bridges, and rebuilt relationships with our allies overseas. Happy anniversary, President Biden. You know, despite those achievements, that he remains underwater. Here's my question, and it may sound like it comes from left field. The hot mic moment that he had with Peter Doocy last week, some say that's what we need more of. Joe Biden needs to, show us that fire in the belly. In fact, some go so far as to think it really wasn't a hot mic, that it was deliberate. Anyway, might that be the secret to returning his mojo?
Well, Michael, one of the things that I know President Biden hopes for this year, and so do I, is that he'll have the chance to get out and mix it up with people. Nobody loves being at a union hall or a diner, at a town hall or at a county gathering than my friend and our president, Joe Biden. And one of the things that happens when he's out just mixing it up with people is, yes, he says unguarded things. And I do think that folks appreciate his directness, his bluntness, his honesty. But I also think Americans appreciate his simple decency. After he said that, after he was caught on a hot mic saying something not very complimentary about Doocy, he called him and offered an apology for saying something that wasn't very gracious. Can you imagine his predecessor doing that? Ever? I think Joe Biden is also, at the same time that he's got strong feelings and strong opinions and passions, he's also a decent person. After he gave a speech in Atlanta that Senator McConnell took offense to, President Biden literally stopped by Senator McConnell's office to talk to him. After that hot mic moment, he called Doocy to talk to him. I think we have a man of great deep passions, as we've seen in recent weeks. He takes the fight to his opponents and he stands up for folks, but he's also decent and he wants to bring our country together. While there are many who have some criticisms over the record of the past year, I'll say the guy keeps trying and he's delivered amazing results on infrastructure, on combating the pandemic, on standing up to Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, in pulling together our allies around the world. And I'm hopeful, even optimistic, that later this year, we will see both our growing economy and a fading pandemic turn towards a more positive mood and a more positive nation as we go forward into 2022.
All right. And if I wonder whether he knew that mic was hot, I'm wearing a tinfoil hat. I think you're telling me.
I think that was classic, unscripted Joe Biden. Yes.
All right. But he didn't know the mic was hot, right?
I don't know. I didn't talk to him about it. But having been around him up close at a lot of events over many years, I'm pretty confident that that was just him.
I get it.
He wouldn't say something he would not say something that was insulting like that on purpose. He wouldn't script it.
Got it.
That's
okay.
just not Joe Biden.
All right. All right. Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Get that chimney cleaned and maybe it will work. Who knows? I got a guy for the job. I know a guy, as they say. Senator, thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael. Great being on with you again.
Nice to have you here. United States Senator Chris Coons, ladies and gentlemen. We'll come back and talk about those comments in just a moment.